Max Emory joins me here today. You can see what his team can help you with by heading over to timecapitalbcs.com. And it's bookkeeping. So take advantage of what Max has offers right now until the end of the year, 50% off of bookkeeping cleanup. And let's face it, you need it. So really appreciate your time here, Max.
Thanks so much for having me, Jack. I'm excited to do this with you.
I appreciate someone who has kind of found their niche with bookkeeping and real estate investing. And frankly, I've had bookkeepers in the past, and it's just sometimes it just typically doesn't work out because they just don't have that real estate background. Can you we start things off by talking about how you found your way into this, maybe even about your real estate investing and then how it led into this bookkeeping?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I was actually a real estate investor before starting Time Capital Bookkeeping, which I know is a little unusual. I had the operator experience prior to serving other real estate investors in a bookkeeping capacity. But yeah, so I was, my original background's in mechanical engineering. I did that fresh out of college. Pretty quickly got into the Marine Corps, commissioned as an artillery officer. Did that for 4 years, but it was really in the middle of my Marine Corps journey where I discovered real estate investing. I had just never heard of it before reading Rich Dad Poor Dad. I had never heard of those concepts or even the term real estate investor. I had just never heard of any of that. And so yeah, that book really opened my mind to it while I was deployed out to the Pacific is when I read that book. About 4 months later, I closed on my first duplex. And so then I was kind of off to the races with my investing journey while I was still in the Marine Corps. Scaled up to 25 units over 2.5 years, small multifamily, doing the BRRRR strategy. This was back like 2019 to 2022, like that time frame. So it was really in the middle of my real estate investing journey, networking with a lot of other investors at a similar level and ahead of me as well. Some way, way ahead of me, like large investors. And a lot of the issues that I heard and participated in discussions, it seemed to kind of root back to investors not being super duper clear on their numbers. And then obviously that roots back to bookkeeping, right? Like bookkeeping kind of sets the foundation for us to be able to know property performance and dial in our buy box for deals. And then, of course, the very obvious being ready for tax season every year, and not having tax season stress you out more than it should. And so, yeah, I kind of identified that opportunity just within the being a real estate investor, just within the space. I had always had kind of this genuine interest towards finances, like personal finance, and I ran the books for my personal portfolio and a partnership portfolio as well. And so yeah, I was like, all right, I'm going to officially get certified, become a certified bookkeeper and get some more certifications as well, and then start the business and start helping our community in that way. I just did it on my own starting out and then kind of scaled up from there and very quickly realized that the bookkeeping for real estate investors just gets super duper complex pretty quickly with all the different properties and business activities and entities and partnerships and creative finance. And the list goes on with just the average real estate investor. They don't even have to be a large investor, financial situation to be pretty complex. And so that's, noticing that with my personal portfolio, but especially once I started serving other real estate investors in a bookkeeping capacity, that's when I made the decision to really like niche down and just serve real estate investors and eventually become like the best at that.
Yeah, you mentioned buying that first duplex while you were deployed. Was that through a turnkey, or how did you acquire that first one?
Yeah, so I didn't purchase it while I was deployed. Once we got off ship and we got back to kind of where we were based out of for the deployment, which was Okinawa, Japan, I did start just going through a deep dive. I found bigger pockets. I started connecting with realtors. I started taking pretty immediate action. I think I made one or two offers while, from Japan for properties back in the States. I got back to the States, it would have been May of 2019. And then I closed on that first duplex in August of 2019. A few months after I got back, I did submit a couple of offers from out there.
You mentioned that real estate investing books can get very complicated, and I completely understand that piece of it. Like, have you found that one strategy seems to be more complex than another?
The intricacies of creative finance introduce complexities pretty quickly, just kind of multiple parties involved. And it's just not what you think of like a traditional real estate closing. It's just not that. So Yeah, the creative finance side, even short-term rentals, believe it or not, can get kind of complex on the bookkeeping side if they're using all these different booking platforms and they're integrated with these other third-party platforms and they're using things like Hostaway, not to get into the nitty-gritty details. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot, as you know, like there are so many different kind of activities and asset classes and all that within the real estate investing industry, and they all come with their own complexities.
One of the better bookkeepers that I've run into, they also help with kind of painting that picture of the business and what's actually going on. And I'm usually pretty startled how many companies run without just basic KPIs. Can you talk a little bit about how you might help people with that, or maybe some of that low hanging fruit for house flippers or whatnot?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. We can create just very well, I'll say this kind of prior to getting into that. Our 100% focus is just the bookkeeping and setting that foundation. But for clients who want that kind of higher level service, we can create KPIs, kind of build that into their financial statements package that we give to them every single month. And so there's, there's just very high level KPIs that any and every business that exists can take advantage of. For flippers, just like one of the super duper simple ones is just gross profit per flip and gross profit margin. Like that's just something great to know. And for that to be accurate, the bookkeeping has to be 100% accurate, right? I have stories where clients who maybe had something on a spreadsheet thought that they had a profit of 40K for this flip. Then we do everything in QuickBooks and we reconcile everything. And then we find out that the profit was only 20K. Everything goes back to the bookkeeping. The bookkeeping has to be super solid for any of these other things to work. But yeah, there's KPI dashboards and all sorts of things that investors out there can take advantage of. They're also specific to flippers versus a wholesaler versus a landlord. They all will say care about different metrics as far as their business goes.
I would imagine that you've had some pretty interesting conversations with people, especially flippers, because sometimes I find that people get into this, and then when they finally get somebody to handle their books, they realize that they didn't really make anything on it. In fact, they create another job, like, and all they did was fund their own job.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's really just kind of startling the amount of investors who just aren't properly keeping records. They're moving really fast. And so they're kind of getting into the next deal before they've analyzed the performance of the last few deals they've done. So we really urge them to just, once we have the books in order and we have complete financials, at the entity level, the property level, and just overall for their entire business. Let's take a look at what's going on. We have the data now, so let's actually use the data to drive decisions. So if we see these three deals are more profitable than the rest, what do they have in common? And now let's apply that to your buy box. Let's start doing more of the more profitable stuff and less of the least profitable stuff. So we try to keep it super duper simple, but at the end of the day, we want to drive more profitability for the clients, right? And so once you have that data, your main thing is like, okay, now we need to actually look at the data to make better decisions. That's what we try to get to.
Can you talk or maybe share a situation where once they have some insight into their numbers, where it actually improves the business and that gives them the opportunity to scale and grow?
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, just with the gross profit margin per deal, like that KPI that I think everybody should track, that allows us to look at which, for a flipper, for example, like which of our flips are way more profitable than the rest. Right. And so it's like the example I just gave, it's like, okay, what do those flips have in common? Do we need to maybe change our buy box criteria for these next few deals and see if it stays consistent? So that's going to drive a lot more profitability for the business. Looking at your operating expenses versus your revenue. Is anything overinflated? Are we overpaying on payroll? Looking at all of our expenses, what stands out? Doing some sort of expense analysis would be super helpful. Just doing that for some clients, it's going to drive greater profitability, especially if we see maybe looking at their marketing channels. And it's like, well, this marketing channel is pretty expensive every month, and it doesn't look like there have been any deals that have come from this marketing channel. So maybe we cut that and reinvest into the most profitable marketing channels. That's going to drive much more performance in the business. And it's also going to take some work off their plate too, right? Because they no longer have to entertain the least profitable marketing channels. But yeah, it just comes back to bookkeeping. We have to have the bookkeeping in place to even begin to look at that sort of stuff.
Well, I get quite a few guests on this show, and we talk about the economy and the future and the outlook, but it typically starts with your own numbers, your own bookkeeping. Those are going to be greater indicators as versus the perceived what's going on in the greater world. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah. I mean, that's how I treat my personal businesses, you know. I'm like, what is going on with what I'm doing rather than looking at a national average or, you know, looking at other markets that I'm not even in, you know. So yeah, that's kind of how I view things. But yeah, I think it's much more important to actually look at your numbers and how your deals are performing or your rental properties or, you know, whatever your business model is and making better decisions based off of the data that we're looking at within your business, putting your business in a bubble. I think that's a much better way to go about making decisions, especially at the level that most real estate investors are. Now, once you're a massive billion-dollar real estate firm, you're most likely looking at international metrics at that point. But for most of us, you just need to look at what's going on within your world.
Right. We were talking about this because we do house flipping. And one of the things that we discovered after we had to force ourselves to come to the realization that we were taking quite a long time, 9 months, sometimes a year. Part of our world is that when winter hits, nobody's moving. So if we're coming up on that time where if we're not selling houses, we're carrying them through the winter. Taking a look at the numbers, we realized that we were maintaining relatively the same margin if we were doing like the basics, cleaning up the house and even selling the property as a discount ourselves and versus holding up for that long, doing the full fix and flip scenario. And unless you're actually looking at the numbers, you might not even realize that that's the case.
Yeah, that's a very clear example of just actually having the data there and then using the data to make decisions. You know, like that's our main thing is decision ready financials, you know, delivering to house flippers, wholesalers, landlords, decision ready financials so they can make more money. And that also saves you guys more time too, you know, because your cash conversion cycle now is much quicker as far as your timeline for each project and you're not having to maybe get as many contractors and the budgets are less and maybe a little less risk in that strategy as well. So yeah, and you
Mhm.
guys would have never known that if you didn't have the data and if you didn't actually look at the data. So that's an amazing example of, you know, how this is helping you personally.
And if you like the concept of decision making financials, which I just like the way you said that, Max, go to timecapitalbcs.com. That's going to be a clickable link in the show notes. If you found some value in what we're chatting about so far, do us a favor. This show only grows if you share it with a real estate investing friend. So consider do that. And if you're watching us on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe. So, outside of hiring your team, Max, you have had to run into like some head smacking moments where you're just like, why aren't they doing or handling it at least at this level? Like, what is some of the low hanging fruit of somebody who is trying to handle some of this bookkeeping themselves that could make a huge difference come tax time?
Wow. Yeah. So let's take the person that does not have a professional bookkeeping service. You know, maybe they're doing their own books, maybe they're not. I think the first thing I tell people to immediately stop doing if they're currently doing it, especially investors, is co-mingling. For the listeners, if you don't know what co-mingling is, a quick example is I purchase a personal thing on my business credit card, and then vice versa too. Maybe you purchase something for the business on your personal credit card and then with investors, especially since we have all these entities in the mix, 123 LLC pays for something on behalf of ABC LLC. So that's kind of like business to business commingling, we refer to it as. And so if you can just stop that, even if you don't have any entities, if you can just, you know, maybe have an extra personal checking account or an extra personal, probably both extra personal credit card as well, and just keep your real estate activities on those and don't commingle those financial accounts with anything personal. Just reserve those for business if you don't have any entities. If you do have entities, then the business accounts need to stay business, the personal accounts need to stay personal. It's incredibly simple, but it's somewhat hard to execute if you're not used to operating that way because it your daily operations have to align with that, right? So like I think that's the lowest hanging fruit that could probably that's probably the highest leverage, lowest hanging fruit to help someone out immediately.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good tip. I can see how it's easy to happen when you're at Menards and you're trying to buy whatever and you don't have your business card, or you just like, well, I'll just reimburse myself. It can get muddy pretty quickly.
It can, yeah, and, it's for you and your tax professional, it's a sanity thing too, it's like, wow, everything's, nice and organized, and these couple of accounts or each entity is separated in a very nice way. All the transactions flowed, throughout the year the way they were supposed to. That's even if you don't have bookkeeping records, you can hand that off to a bookkeeper or even tax professionals who also offer that service, and they can pretty easily, get you caught up for the year, at least to file taxes. If you kind of have transactions all over the place, it's going to be a nightmare for you because you're going to have to clarify all those transactions and all those different accounts for the person who's putting this together for you. It just provides sanity all around, and you just become a person who's very easy to work with. All of us, no matter the business, we like working with other people who are easy to work with, right? It creates a great relationship from the get go. Just do yourself a favor and, business is business, personal is personal. Just keep everything separate.
I would imagine that after working with so many different real estate investors across the country, you have kind of an interesting pulse on the market and what's going on right now. You mentioned marketing earlier. Let's start there. Are you seeing any trends right now when it comes to reviewing KPIs, reviewing some of these bookkeepings of some things that are working, may not be working anymore? Anything come to mind?
Yeah, I've honestly seen our clients who have kind of been running the same playbook as far as marketing goes. I haven't seen many changes in that. If one of our clients in, let's say, Tennessee, if a radio works for, which we actually have a client in Tennessee where they do really well with radio. So that has just continued working. That hasn't fallen off or changed. They're still heavily invested in radio, and that works really well for them. Have another client in Alabama, direct mail works way better for them than like SMS campaigns, that sort of thing. And so, as you know, it is heavily market dependent. But yeah, I haven't seen anybody make any huge shifts. Now, strategies for acquiring, I have seen some of our heavy kind of wholesalers and flippers have started to transition more towards development. So finding land, maybe, developing it into a neighborhood, like new construction developments, or maybe just finding those pieces of land, doing minor work on them, and then kind of flipping those to developers who will ultimately develop the neighborhoods and whatnot. So there have been slight shifts there that they haven't stopped wholesaling. They haven't stopped flipping single family houses, but I've just seen more development opportunities popping up now where people are making a ton of money.
Well, how about for you and your business? Are you finding better strategies than others to reach the real estate investors?
Honestly, getting on shows like yours, Jack, I'm really now just trying to kind of put my face out there where I haven't been before, just so people have the awareness, and there's never any pressure with anything. But if any of this stuff sounds helpful, I would love if you'd reach out. But yeah, I'm leaning heavily into relationships. And so us having a relationship and really affiliate relationships is what I lean heavily into these days. As of right now, we're in 2025. If someone refers a monthly client to us, they get on our monthly service with us. That's a $750 payout, referral payout. If someone just needs their books cleaned up, they don't want the monthly service, we do one-off jobs like that as well. We give 20% to whoever sent us that investor. So yeah, that's kind of what we're leaning heavily into these days. But yeah, getting on a show like yours is absolutely huge. So again, I appreciate you having me. It's an excellent show. I'm a fan of the show.
No, I appreciate hearing that. I was curious, and it was kind of a selfish question too, because as you probably know, I've been doing Real Deal Crew, and I was just trying to fish out some marketing strategies regarding that from you. So I appreciate it. With that being said, we were early talking about people scaling and growing their real estate investing. Are you seeing like tools or techniques, or let's go with tools? With AI being prominent, everybody seems to be trying to cram that in every nook and cranny of their businesses lately. Are you finding anything that could kind of make life a little easier for people?
Yeah. So I'm not tied in really heavily to that side of our clients' businesses. I mean, they all have very large tech stacks, especially on the marketing side, all the CRMs and all the different kind of SMS campaign platforms and all that stuff. They're always trying different platforms and comparing how they perform. I definitely can see an opportunity for AI call centers. So we actually just on our personal house, we had some HVAC work done very recently, and we called in. It's a local company. They do have multiple locations, but it's a local company here in Western North Carolina. And it was an AI bot on the phone. I think this was the most realistic sounding AI bot that I've encountered yet. It answered all the questions. They're going to dispatch somebody. At the end of the call, she was like, we can cut it here, or I can tell you a dad joke, like, which option? So we went the
Mhm.
dad joke option, and then we just parted ways. But I can see a huge opportunity for like the AI call, which I'm sure you guys talk about on the show, but AI call centers for real estate investors with all the cold calling. I see a massive opportunity there. I'm not sure. I can't tell you right now if any of our clients are experimenting with something like that, but I'm sure some of them are.
Yeah. Actually, I deployed a few of those already for real estate
Wow.
investors. So yeah, in fact, I use one personally. So if I'm not available to answer the phone call, Jessica does. So,
That's
and I
amazing.
just had a conversation with a distressed homeowner just yesterday.
Wow.
So yeah,
And
at the
oh,
time I would say that at half the time I'd say that the person knows it's a
sure,
computer.
sure.
The other half though, they carry on a conversation as if they don't realize it.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it is kind of interesting.
It
You know,
it
one of the other
interesting
things
time.
that I've been thinking about tackling is an automation to do some of the categorization that you're talking about. Because, with our phones and everything and receipts and that right now, and OCR, you could scan something and then have an automation sort it and send it to your bookkeeper.
Yeah, on the bookkeeping side, we're a super tech forward firm. Every piece of tech we use now has AI built into it. It has its own
Mhm.
AI bot for very specific types of support within the apps. And also on the client side too. The client portal that we supply to clients has a receipt snap feature. It's very similar to Books, like their app has a receipt snap
Sure.
feature as well. And it has AI built into that. But yeah, they snap a receipt, send it into us, multiple different methods that they can send it into our side. And on our side, it has like an AI feature that gets it, I would say 90% there. And then we can do the last 10% in the bookkeeping space. I know this is a real estate podcast, but in the bookkeeping space specifically, AI is becoming huge. I mean, everything we touch
Right.
now has AI integrated. It really is on my side and also within the real estate industry. Staying ahead of this is going to be key. I know your podcast Lee, is all about capturing the latest and greatest uses of AI. It's a good service that you're providing.
Well, it's just one of those things that I think it's inevitable. So if people aren't going to they got to get in front of it now.
Hmm.
I think I saw an article regarding QuickBooks recently. Did they just announce that they're going to discontinue their desktop app? I think that's what I
Yeah,
heard.
they've been working towards that for the past few years. They discontinued support for QuickBooks Desktop. And so now I guess they're kind of gearing up to just totally doing away with it. We purely operate on QuickBooks Online. We've done that from the get go. With us being a 100% cloud based firm and all of our clients being all over the country, team members all over the
Mhm.
country, it just works best for us. But yeah, you did see that right. And there's a ton of changes going on within Intuit, which is the parent company over QuickBooks.
I would imagine we almost have to, especially if you're incorporating some of this AI, the processing power that's required. That's one of, frankly, I can get on the soapbox here, but that's one of the reasons Apple's been having problems with Siri and some things is because trying to run some of this locally can be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, yeah, I could definitely see that. Yeah, lots of challenges, specifically QuickBooks desktop. Lots of challenges there, especially if you have just team members who are remote. But yeah, the technology side of it, yeah, that's got to be a huge sticking point.
I wanted to touch on that, and I was going to jump into the rapid fire and close out this episode, but now you spurred a thought because I've seen a few people who kind of, unfortunately, with real estate investors, I think we're seeing virtual assistants whether in different countries, kind of being thrown at whatever problem that is perceived. So anything from marketing to automations to bookkeeping.
Mm.
Like, can you talk a little bit about that? Maybe I just think that's sometimes a mistake to just kind of be throwing resources at something instead of thinking through this for a minute.
Definitely, yeah. Specifically, it really just comes down to like, what's the person, regardless of where they're at, what's the person's training, what is their area of expertise, and then, if let's say the VA is a trained bookkeeper, no matter where they're located, do they have experience in your industry? So real estate investing. And so what we see a lot, a ton of people come to our firm, some become clients, some don't, but I have a ton of conversations with real estate investors where yeah, they hired the VA overseas and, they didn't do a whole lot of vetting because they don't know what they don't know. And they didn't realize their bookkeeping for the real estate investing business is as complicated as it is. And it takes a very niche, it's like, okay, now it's a whole nother bucket of knowledge of how we translate the nuances of REI onto the books. And so it's kind of two steps, but yeah, we just have a lot of people come to us where they, the VA basically didn't know real estate. And so kind of, screwed up their books. And so now they're kind of in this mess. Right. And the VA was very cheap, taking advantage of the value exchange, the currency exchange. But at the end of the day, it's just wasted dollars and it's wasted time. So there are some good ones out there, but I would say if someone is advertising themselves as a virtual assistant, they're most likely not a bookkeeper, but they're going to tell you they're a bookkeeper because they just want the revenue, right? They just want the cash flow.
Mhm.
And so,
Right.
yeah, you have to look out for that. I would say just how to combat that, just ask specific real estate investing questions. They don't have to be bookkeeping questions. Just like, hey, do you know what a wholesale is? Do you know what subject to means? Just ask them very specific real estate investing questions. And if they don't have good answers for those, then they don't know the industry, right? Because REI, above all other industries, I think, has its own language. It'll be very quick, very clear if they know REI or not.
No, that's a really good tip. I just hate to go back to my personal experience on this, but it's actually hard to find somebody, a bookkeeper in the United States that
Mhm.
knows the real estate investing to the level that they do, let alone trying to break some sort of language barrier on top of it.
Yeah, it's an added layer of complexity for sure. I have a sister business called Time Capital University to Time Capital Bookkeeping. It's an education company that educates other bookkeepers on how to serve real estate investors. It's a very active business. You have to get someone who has some sort of REI bookkeeping training at the least. Ensure they know the language, they know what you're talking about. Otherwise, you're going to sink countless hours into just explaining like this is a joint venture. There are complexities within REI that just aren't in other industries.
Well, Max, this has been such a great conversation.
I think we covered it, Jack. I appreciate it.
Okay, well, if you're ready, we'll jump right in. But before we do, one last time, it is timecapitalbcs.com. That's going to be a clickable link in the show notes. Like I mentioned before, take advantage of this 50% off book cleaning. And I can't for some reason say that, Mac. You take advantage of the 50% off book cleanup. But if you're ready, we'll jump into the rapid fire and close out this episode.
Let's do it.
What lie do real estate often tell themselves?
That their bookkeeping is not complex and an untrained VA can do it.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice, what would it be?
Focus. Try your best to avoid the shiny object syndrome. And if you have a business model that makes money, it may be boring, but if it makes money and it works, ask yourself, why can't I 10x this before starting something new?
Do you have a book recommendation?
I think my top book recommendation these days is $100 million Offers by Alex Hermosi.
And yeah, and that was quite the event to watch.
I was out of town. I wasn't able to make it, but I heard it was epic.
That was a master class on everything he teaches.
I,
I can go down a rabbit hole on some things, but it
I
got me rethinking a whole different strategies on some things lately.
yep.
And then finally, what single tool or process have you implemented that has had the biggest time saving impact?
Probably a year and a half ago, I started scheduling my priorities on my calendar. And now it's gotten to the point to where I schedule everything, every single item that I'm going to work on is a block on my calendar, and even my personal stuff. It's like every minute is accounted for. And that has driven just so much productivity and growth for me.
Well, Max, this was just fantastic. Really appreciate your time. I hope you'll consider coming back again sometime. It was great to meet you.
I would love to, Jack. It was so good to meet you, and we'll definitely stay in touch. I appreciate the opportunity.